Weapons is a tricky one for me, okay? I enjoyed it a lot. It's insane, it's well made, and it's definitely worth checking out, I would say, but I also think this might be the most overrated horror movie this year. All right, let's talk about the setup. It's wild. You got 17 kids out of 18 in a classroom that happen to vanish at 2:17 in the morning. The story plays through multiple perspectives until everything collides in the third act. You got our teacher, Justine. You have a parent, Archer, who I just kept calling Thanos because it's Josh Brolin and I forgot his name. But we have the principal, Marcus, the cop, Paul, and a junkie, James. And of course, the one student who didn't disappear, Alex. It's a layered structure that honestly reminded me, oddly enough, of Sorry Baby, if you've seen that. Just, the movie from this year, and that's about as far from horror as you can get. Uh, but that's how the structure reminded me of, shifting through these POVs. With this, you slowly piece together what happened, what is happening, how the town's reacting, what's going on with the other people connected to the case. It is fun to watch, and there's some great moments. The film sprinkles in some humor in there to break some tension. Honestly, I think sometimes it was a little too much humor. And you've got some solid, jump scares in there. But of course, every horror movie has some very basic ones as well. The movie keeps you engaged, and it also keeps you confused. The shifting POV just fills in gaps, but it doesn't fully give enough substance. You could remove this POV aspect of the film and it would still work fine. And I feel like that's one of my issues. Them shifting the POVs doesn't change the plot if this aspect doesn't exist. And if we are talking pure fear factor, I don't want to get too much into comparisons, but I'm going to. Okay, so fair warning, but Hereditary, Conjuring, and Insidious still have it beat by miles. I would say Weapons is honestly more disturbing and freaky than it is traditionally scary. I kind of see it as the Midsummer vibes with a lot more jump scares in terms of just the vibe of the horror. It's not even the scariest I've seen this year, to be honest with you. I think The Home had better scares and better storytelling for a horror movie. On top of that, Together had that fear factor and that disturbing aspect that this movie is supposed to have, and it's done so much better. A lot of the messaging that the film wants to portray isn't fully understood. The only messaging that truly got across for me on my watch, slight spoiler, not really, there's a rifle hovering over the house in Archer's dream. But this stands out because it has nothing to do with the dream and nothing to do with the story aside from trying to add to a message that only exists when you hear other people point out these little things in these other review videos on YouTube, and you're watching these ending explained videos. And those are good to watch, but for a film like this, you shouldn't need to explain your entire messaging of the film. And that includes the meaning behind this 217 number. And I do appreciate the message that the director wants to give, but I don't think it's told well enough. Like I said, I love the ending explain things. I really do enjoy movies that don't hold your hand and walk you through it, but also this one is almost too ambiguous and it doesn't even tell enough of that messaging to get that point across. One thing I do love is that most of the trailer footage It comes from early in the movie. So a lot of that third act feels fresh, you know. But a lot of the trailer footage and how it's structured in all the trailers makes this film truly seem like it's going to be like the craziest movie of the year. And it's insane. It is. But it's like, it's portraying that it's going to have these absolutely insane scares, this horrifying plot, just overall creepy, almost gives you like the original Conjuring kind of vibes. However, when you sit down and watch the film, the trailers are basically misleading, and in that aspect, it reminds me of 28 Years Later. And that film and those trailers are heavily misleading, so I'm not going to get into that here. The villain reveal is solid, and I think the twist works well for the twist, but that's a bit of a double edged sword. It's satisfying to piece everything together, but then the suspense drops off. The movie has a bunch of points throughout that make it extremely predictable in terms of where the story is going to go. There are some little twists there that explain, like, kind of what happened. And sure, that isn't predictable. Like, the villain twist isn't predictable. You don't really know. But the overall plot, especially after the twist, heavily predictable. But the cast is fantastic. Especially the kids who are unsettling in the best way. The directing is sharp, cinematography is gorgeous, and there's some really impressive like long takes, like the long shots, the dolly shots, and these first person POVs too that they threw in there. Fun. I love it. And I don't want to get it twisted. This is a good horror film. I enjoyed, watching the film, but in a year that's packed with great horror films, I don't think this is the masterpiece that some people are making it out to be. It's memorable. It's potentially rewatchable. I guess I would have to rewatch it to consider if it's rewatchable. Um, and a lot of it is well executed, but it's not the scariest by any means, and it is definitely not the best. You know, Bottom line is Weapons is still worth seeing. Especially if you like your horror a little more creepy and disturbing than pure terror. And if you watch the trailers, that's not really what you would expect. So, kind of just temper your expectations a little bit. It's fun, it's wild, but I wouldn't put it at the top of any horror list, let alone even my 2025 horror list. But with all that being said, you've made it this far and you still have not subscribed. Why not? You're already here. Thank you all so much for being here. I do really appreciate it. Leave a like on the video. It really does help out the channel so much. And I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.